Hey folks, my name is Jeff Atkinson. Welcome to our first edition of 15-Minute Fridays. The intent of this webinar series is to just take a few minutes to look over a very specific subject in a short amount of time, to introduce maybe a concept that hasn't been discussed or you may not be familiar with, and hopefully you can take a little bit of knowledge away from just spending a short little sliver of your Friday afternoon with us. And so you might be saying, well, who are you? My name again is Jeff Atkinson. I'm a director of agronomy for Harrell's, and I'll tell you a little bit more about Harrell's here in a moment, realizing that some folks that may be joining us on our YouTube channel do not know necessarily who Harrell's is. I have a BS in turfgrass science from University of Clemson, or from Clemson University, and also a master's and a PhD from the same school. I have 19 years experience in the industry, in the green industry, specifically in the turfgrass industry, and I serve as the Polyon Field Technical Lead for Harrell's. But as a director of agronomy, I should not say that I am a one-man team. I also need to point out that I'm part of a team of a total of three. We have Dr. Raymond Snyder, who is the original director of agronomy for Harrell's, has been with the company for a number of years, based out of Lakeland, Florida, as a trained soil scientist. And Dr. Paul Giordano, who is a trained plant pathologist out of Michigan State and is a resident currently of Detroit, Michigan. So, three-man team, we have a broad diversity of expertise, and our goal is to provide our customers with technical support as well as play a role in developing some class-leading products, whichever markets that we're serving. But a little bit about Harrell's. Harrell's was founded in 1941 by a gentleman named Orman Harrell, who's pictured in the top left of your screen. He developed the company over a number of years, and then it started out as a family feed and seed store in Lakeland, Florida. Over time, as a feed and seed store grew, there's opportunities to sell fertilizers as well to golf courses, and that was really the origins of the Harrell's that we know today. So for a period of time, the company was ran by the gentleman in the top right, or on the left side of the photograph in the top right, Jack Harrell Sr., and is now ran today by his son, Jack Harrell Jr., who is on the right hand of the photograph in the top right of your screen. Harrell's operates about 24 locations across the United States, so we're a coast-to-coast distributor and manufacturer of goods that are required to grow turf, whether that's golf, whether that's sports fields, whether that's lawn care, and also in the green industry as well with nursery and ornamentals. And we do have a specialty agriculture a presence as well. So what I want to talk about today, winter weed cleanup options. We're here, it's the first week of March, and there are a lot of folks who are coming out of winter and saying, man, my pre-emergent program either didn't perform as well as I thought that it would, or maybe you didn't apply a pre-emergent program or pre-emergent herbicide last fall, and now you're paying the price in terms of heavy weed density populations. And now certainly we're not going to talk about all the different solutions, all the different options for weed control, but I want to cover two big, blanket areas of spring control of winter weeds, and that's annual bluegrass control and then also broadleaf control, and specifically the differences and nuances of which products that you might pick, why, and when. And throughout the whole presentation, we'll also look at some different keys in terms of adjuvant selection as it relates to specific products. So this may be a common issue that you see or a common occurrence on your properties that you manage. This is a golf course in Florida, Central Florida area, that has a POA annual population that's probably a result of a skip during the pre-emergence herbicide application earlier in the fall. You'll notice the other areas around are relatively clean, and you just have these small pockets of annual bluegrass which remain. And so the question might be, okay, we've got annual bluegrass, now what can we do, or what are our options in a post-emergence sense to control annual bluegrass? And so you look at a list of just the post-emergence control options that are available to us on the market today. Some of these are more effective than others. Some of these are safer on Bermuda grass than others. Some will show symptoms quickly. Some will show symptoms more slowly. Each one of these has their different nuances in the way that they're used and the way that they properly should be used. But you can see the product name on the left. These are the brand names that you'll see in the market. These are the brand names that are available through Harrell's, Finale, Cheetah Pro, Reward, Katana, Monument, so on and so forth. Each one of their active ingredients in the center column. And then something that's very important, especially when we start to talk about herbicide resistance and making sure that we're not using the same product with every single application. We have what we call the Weed Science Society Action Code. And this is a code that designates the mode of action for the specific herbicide. So for an example, Reward, the active ingredient there is a diquat. It has a WSSA code of 22. We compare that to Princep, active ingredient simazine. It has a WSSA code of 5. And so that tells us that since the WSSA codes are different, that these two materials act differently on the plant. So they're not going to, if you're able to rotate these chemistries, apply one this year, maybe apply one next year, apply a different one the next year, that they're going to have a different way of going about killing the plant. And by doing that, they're going to prevent the development of resistance within the plant to that specific herbicide. As kind of an alternative, if you will, if someone were to apply, let's use Monument as an example, trifloxysulfuron, with a WSSA code of 2, if they apply it year after year after year after year after year, eventually the plant will develop resistance to that herbicide and no longer be effective, or the herbicide will no longer be effective. And if it is no longer effective to trifloxysulfuron, likely it's also not going to be effectively killed by something like a flazosulfuron, also has a 2 WSSA code, 4-am sulfuron, 2 WSSA code, so on and so forth. So let's look at a few of our control options. You know, I mentioned as we got into this that there's a trade-off, right? Speed of kill, speed of symptomology versus completeness of kill. This is an example of diquat. So diquat comes in a couple of different active ingredient, a couple of different product names. Reward is one product name or one common trade name. Another would be Tribune, which is another formulation of diquat. Photograph here on the left, this is 48 hours after application. You can see there's some clear symptomology happening. But 10 days after application, because we didn't have complete kill, you see a rebound effect from the annual bluegrass, and it's actively growing and actively healthy. So we had quick symptomology, but we had very incomplete kill of the plant. So let's look at a little bit of a kind of a graphical take of this. You know, this isn't an exact science. There's no necessarily specific data behind this figure, but just to kind of give you an idea of the relationship between the long-term kill of a herbicide versus the speed of efficacy. So in your horizontal axis here, you have speed of efficacy. 1 equals very slow, 5 equals very fast. So you notice here with diquat, the photograph that we just looked at, we have very fast speed of symptomology that appears. But on the vertical axis, long-term kill, 1 is a very low amount of long-term kill, and 5 is a very effective amount of long-term kill. So when you look at diquat example, okay, we made the application, we saw some very quick symptomology, but 10 days later we had regrowth. So we have fast symptoms, but we have low long-term kill. On the other end of the spectrum, we have a very slow material, Curb. Now, I should say Curb is a very effective annual bluegrass herbicide, but once we get to the point to where annual bluegrass is very mature, it doesn't work as well. And that's also indicated on the label of this specific product. So you have very slow symptom development, and you also have very low long-term kill, again, for mature annual bluegrass. If we were talking about immature annual bluegrass that germinates in the previous fall, then it would be an entirely different story. Look at a few different of these active ingredients. The sulfonylureas, these include products like Katana, Monument, and Revolver. They have very slow symptom development, so I rated them as a 1 in terms of symptom development, but they are very good at providing complete kill of the plant, so I rated them as a 5. So slow symptom development, but complete kill. So here's your trade-off. Sulfonylureas that are up here, complete kill, slow symptoms. Diquat, fast symptoms, very slow kill, or very low levels of kill. And then the other products are somewhere here in the middle. Glyphosate, a little bit faster symptomology, but complete kill. SureGuard, which is flumioxazin, or Syncor, which is metribuzin, faster symptomology and actually pretty good kill. And so maybe this is a good option for you because it's right here. It gives you quick symptoms, and it gives you pretty good kill. And that's a similar story for glufosinate, which is a product that goes by Finale XL or Cheetah Pro in the market. But that's not the only consideration that we have to make. We also have to make a consideration, especially this time of year, as Bermuda grass is starting to come out of dormancy. What is the trade-off between long-term kill and the effects on Bermuda grass safety? So similar setup here, long-term kill, 1 to 5 scale, 1, no effects, 5, complete death. And the horizontal axis here is Bermuda grass safety. No safety, meaning that if you spray it to kill POA, you're probably also going to kill the Bermuda grass, and when the Bermuda grass is in a semi-dormant state, versus 5, which is a material that is completely safe to apply to Bermuda grass this time of year. And so look at the Bermuda grass safety, you would say glyphosate, which is Roundup. There's a lot of other formulations of glyphosate as well, but doesn't have a high level of Bermuda grass safety. You may kill the Bermuda grass, you may set it back, you may delay its green up for a long period of time, but you're going to have good efficacy on your annual bluegrass. A little bit safer is diquat, glufosinate, ShoreGuard. Reason being, these materials are more of contact herbicides. They're going to burn down the green tissue that is there in terms of Bermuda grass. But over time, as long as you have relatively healthy Bermuda grass, it's in good sun, has good irrigation or has good water availability, it's going to rebound in a relatively short amount of time. So safer than glyphosate applications, but then again, you also have to consider the long-term kill aspect as well. And then you keep going down the line, Syncor, perhaps a bit less safe than some of these materials are. And that's not always true. Syncor, if you irrigate it following application, you can actually make it a little bit safer of a material. But in this particular figure, I'm just assuming that someone would apply it and leave it on the leaf surface. And then you also have the sulfonylureas and curb, which materials that are applied to Bermuda grass, they're completely safe. You don't have really any concerns for phytotoxicity on the Bermuda grass. So again, the long-term kill on sulfonylureas is high, and also the Bermuda grass safety is high. It's also important to consider with these different products that you apply that you're using the right adjuvant as well. So one commonality when you have a failure of a herbicide, or something that happens often when you have a failure of a herbicide, is that the correct adjuvant was not applied with the material. So for example, with Katana, this is flazosulfuron, this is a sulfonylurea herbicide. If you look back at our couple of graphs that we showed previously, it's very safe, it has a high level of kill, and it has a great longevity of kill, meaning that a single application is often all you'll need to kill an annual bluegrass stand. But you will notice on the label, this is taken directly from the Katana label, where it states the use of a non-ionic surfactant at 0.25% volume per volume is going to provide maximum performance. And so if you don't have this adjuvant, if you don't have something like the Harrell's non-ionic penetrant plus, then it may not perform as advertised. This is similar to Finale XL. This is the glufosinate, another material that we've looked at. This one on the label recommends the addition of ammonium sulfate, a spray grade ammonium sulfate, plus either a methylated seed oil or a non-ionic surfactant. And so with Harrell's, we have a product that's wrapped both of those all into one, what we call herbicide activator. And if you apply a herbicide activator with Finale XL TNO at 8 pints per 100 gallons of water, this herbicide activator will provide both the 2 to 4 pounds of ammonium sulfate per acre and fit the requirement for the non-ionic surfactant at 0.25% volume per volume. Now, if you look very closely, this is a photograph I took yesterday of some research plots. This is Finale on the left, and then this is by itself, and then Finale plus herbicide activator on the right. And if you look very closely, you can see that there's a slight green tinge or more green tinge in the Finale plots that did not receive the herbicide activator. So in person, when you're looking at the plots, you can clearly see that there's a benefit of including the correct adjuvant as recommended by the herbicide label with the application. But as we were talking about resistance earlier, it's all too common to see a photograph like this. And this is taken from a paper that was published a couple of years ago by Dr. Jim Brosnan out of University of Tennessee, Herbicide-Resistant Weeds and Turfgrass, Current Status and Emerging Threats. And this is common with herbicide resistance. A golf course that had a same material applied year after year after year after year. And in this case, this golf course had glyphosate or Roundup applied for a number of years in a row. And you'll notice that there are a few isolated plants throughout the fairway here that are showing symptoms of herbicide injury, but the overall vast majority of the plants are green, healthy, and growing without any herbicide injuries. And these have all received an application of Roundup, have all received an application of glyphosate, but they are clearly not showing the symptoms, indicating that they are resistant to glyphosate applications. So just to reinforce, it's very important when you're selecting which one of these active ingredients or which one of these products that you're going to use, that you are intentional about rotating your WSSA codes, or you're intentional about rotating your modes of action. So in year 1, maybe you use Revolver, which has a WSSA code of 2. Maybe in year 2, you go down to Simazine, which has a WSSA code of 5. In year 3, you go to glufosinate, which has a WSSA code of 10. And so it's a pretty simple concept, just making sure that you rotate the modes of actions between years so that resistance does not develop on your property. Because once you have resistance, that problem doesn't go away. It's likely going to be stuck with your property, with your population of annual bluegrass for a very long time to come. Talk a little bit briefly about broadleaf weed control as well as we get into this time of year. You know, there's a lot of different 3-way type broadleaf herbicides, maybe 4-way type broadleaf herbicides that are out there on the market today, and they all have different combinations of active ingredients. This one we're just looking at as an example. This is Triplet SF. This is the New Farm product. And you'll notice something very important here that I want to point out, that it says dimethylamine salt of 2,4-D. All right, and the only thing that's really important here that I want to point out for this discussion is this amine point. So there's really 2 different formulations of a lot of these 3- and 4-way type herbicides. You have amines and you have esters. And the selection of an amine or an ester is very important, especially under spring conditions, cooler conditions, to ensure that you're going to get a high level of control. So an example of an ester would be another New Farm product. This is Cool Power. This one here, as you look at it, contains MCPA, triclopyr, and dicamba. But instead of amine in the chemical name, in the active ingredients, you see that it says ester. And that's going to be a good indication for you that this is an ester formulation as opposed to an amine formulation. So you might be saying, hey, what's different between the esters and the amines? A few generalities that I'll point out. The amines are less volatile, meaning that after application, there's less likelihood that they're going to gas off. And when I mean gas off, it turns into a gaseous form, and then that active ingredient can actually drift and be harmful to sensitive ornamentals. You know, broadleaves, many ornamentals are broadleaf plants. And if a herbicide is active on broadleaf weeds, it's also likely going to be active against broadleaf plants. And so using a material that is less volatile, like an amine, is generally a good practice in a lawn care setting so that we kill the target weeds, we reduce volatilization, and we reduce the potential for injury to our sensitive ornamentals. The downside of amines is that they are not as soluble through the plant cuticle, meaning that the active ingredient doesn't actually get into the cuticle as effectively as esters, which can reduce efficacy under some conditions. These amines are best used because of their low volatility or relatively low volatility. They're best used in late spring, summer, early fall months when you have elevated temperatures, especially in the afternoons. In comparison, esters are more volatile, meaning that they have a greater likelihood to gas off following application, but that also means that they have a higher likelihood of injuring sensitive ornamentals. And now volatilization in a lot of ways is related to air temperature. So if we're talking about cooler temperatures like we are right now this time of year in the early spring, late winter, wintertime, late fall, depending on your location in the country, is that they are going to not volatilize during those periods of times because the temperature in general is just cooler. But compared to amines, esters are going to be more active or have better herbicidal activity because they can move through the plant cuticle much more effectively than the amines. So cooler times of year when volatilization is not as much of a concern, the esters are a good option to enhance your herbicidal activity during the cooler times of the year. And the final thing that I'll point out today is also paying attention. You know, labor is an issue. We're trying to do more with fewer applications or combine more things into fewer applications. And so when you look at tank mixing specifically with herbicides, specifically with iron products or nutritional products, using quality formulations to mix with is going to make your life a whole lot simpler. So here's one example. on the left, this is just a raw iron sulfate material that has been tank mixed with triplet, so 4 pints per acre of triplet. Iron sulfate, this formulation was concluded in the mix at 10 pounds per acre. This is at a 20 gallon per acre spray volume. You can see that there's some clear incompatibility between these two materials in the jar test. And then the photograph on the right, this is a Harrell's product, Harrell's iron product. The rate here is 3 ounces per 1,000 square feet, or about approximately 1 gallon per acre, in combination with the same rate of triplet, 4 pints per acre, all at the same spray volume of 20 gallons per acre. And you'll clearly notice that the formulation in the left is falling out of suspension, while the formulation on the right, or the mix in the right between iron, Mn, Mg, and triplet is staying nicely in solution and is not falling out and won't cause any issues with your spray equipment. And that's really due to the chelation of the material. So if you look at the label, again, where the iron sulfate is just raw iron sulfate, there's no chelation to the material, so it's very reactive material. Whereas the iron MnMg is chelated with citric acid. So that actual chelation is preventing the interactions between the active ingredient of the herbicide and the iron molecules, and protecting it from falling out of solution. So as you're going out this spring, making fertilizer applications, making iron applications, making herbicide applications, make sure that you're making those mixes with quality formulations, and also make sure that even though this looks good here, your water may be different. So it's always a good idea to do a jar test with your own water and your own materials. So that's it. That's our first 15-minute Friday. In 2 weeks, we'll be talking about some pre-emergence control strategies. We hope that you can join us at 2 p.m. in 2 weeks, and we will see you then.